Welcome back, Chippers, to another edition of Chippers TV. In this episode, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a chess and checkerboard. And what I've got is I got a dark colored wood and a light colored wood. And this is what we're going to use to make our checkerboard. I've cut them 20 inches long. So we want to end up with 16 inches, so I've got it at 20 right there. So each piece is cut in 20-inch strips, and then we're going to have to cut each of these down to 2-inch squares, because the regulation size of a chessboard is about, each square is about 2.25 around there. I'm going to make mine just at 2, so to keep it even. So then when we get done with that, the board itself is going to be 16 by 16, and what we're going to end up with is this is what we're going to end up with. So basically, we're going to take these chunks right here of hardwood, and we're going to turn it into a chess and checkerboard. So the first thing I got to do is we're going to go over to the table saw, and I'm going to go ahead and cut my strips. So now we're at the table saw, and so what we got to do is cut our 2-inch strips. So the first thing I did was I measured for my fence in 2 inches, and to make sure it's square, I did the same thing on the other side, so we have our 2 inches. And remember, while I'm doing all that, the power is unplugged. So the next thing I got to do is make sure that the blade height is right. So check that out, and I got the blade high enough so it's just above. And what we're going to do is go ahead and cut our strips, and then we're going to need 4 of each. So we're going to need 4 of the maple and 4 of the mahogany. So before we start, before we use power tools or hand tools, put on our safety glasses, plug in our power, and we'll go ahead and cut our pieces. So as always, we wait for the blade to stop. So I've got my 4 pieces, I've got my 4 mahogany and my 4 maple. So now we're going to take those back over, dark, light, out for our 8 pieces, and that'll be our first glue, and then we'll have to cut them again to do the second glue. Okay, so now that I've cut my pieces, I've got my 4 pieces of light wood, which is the maple, and my 4 pieces of dark wood. Now what we want to do is we want to alternate these, and we're going to lay these out and get them ready to glue. So we're going to start with one of the dark pieces, set that out, dark light, dark light, dark light, and then we'll end up with the light piece on the end. So we're going to get our clamps set, and again, just like with the cutting board, we want to make sure that one of our edges is going to be square. So we're going to make sure we square that up before we clamp it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these bar clamps to actually clamp it. So the first thing we got to do is we actually got to apply our glue, and then we'll get ready to put the pieces together. And before I forget, remember I had some strips left over. Well, this is expensive wood, so we're not going to let this go to waste. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these extra strips and we're going to make another cutting board out of it. So then we'll get two projects out of one with little to no waste. So we take our glue and we're going to spread this around on each piece. So we want to make sure we get it nice and thick all the way down. So we get all our glue, and then we're going to spread that around evenly on the sides. So we'll take each piece and we'll spread the glue out. Make sure we get good coverage all the way down from edge to edge. So we'll keep that going and get this all spread out. And I'm going to continue doing that until I get it all the way spread out, and then we'll go into the clamping project. So I spread the glue out on all my pieces, so we're ready to go on. So what we're going to do now is we flip them down. So we go one down, and then we take the other edge. It doesn't have the glue on it, and that's going to go against our glue edge and glue that down. And we're going to do this through the whole process. And this will get our first part of our gluing, but if you remember correctly, we're going to have it straight on one side. We want to have one edge that's practically perfect. So we're going to do that, and we're going to take our clamps and we're going to get these ready to clamp on the sides. So bring those in and slide this one in. And we'll make sure that we've got everything lined up. And to make sure it's square, we're going to take our square and make sure that we're square on both sides. We are. So then I'm going to take the clamps and we're going to start clamping them down. Keeping them as straight as we can on this one side. So we'll start the clamp there, and then we'll start the clamp on the other side. Pressing down in the middle because we want it to be flat. So we get those tight. Gonna wipe off the excess on this side so you can see where it's coming through where we're clamping. But now I'm going to take two more clamps and we're going to put them in the middle on the side here. So we're going to back this off. So we're going to put that on there like so. And if you can see the glue oozing through as I'm clamping this down. So put that on. Put our other one on. Tighten these all up. Wipe off our excess on this side. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same on the other side before we go on. But what we got to do now is we're going to have to let this dry. So now the glue is dried, so I've taken the clamps off, and this is what we've got. This is our straight edge that we wanted to have, and this is our other edge that we're going to trim off. But if you can see it, you've got little bits of higher edges on different pieces. So before we go to the table saw and cut that down, I'm going to take and I'm going to use the belt sander, and we're going to go ahead and sand down so we get this as smooth as possible, because if you remember correctly, anytime that we're working with wood, this is the way the grain goes. Okay, so when we're sanding with a belt sander, we got to make sure we sand with the grain. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on here. Safety glasses. And then we're going to go ahead and sand down our rough spots on both sides. And I'm going to do that to both sides of this board before we go on to the next step. So now we're back at the table saw, and just like our 2-inch strips for each of our pieces that we cut, power is still unplugged because we're going to make adjustments, but we want to make sure that we're going to cut them in 2-inch pieces. So there's 2, and checking it again, there's our 2. So we're going to go ahead and cut our pieces, and we're going to need total of 8 pieces to put our board together, and this will show you how this jigsaw will go together. So the first thing we do before we do anything with hand tools or power tools, we put on our safety glasses, we'll plug in our power, and we'll go ahead and cut our strips. Okay, now comes the part that's like a puzzle. We cut our pieces, and if you remember correctly, when we had this in a full slab, one side ended up light and one side ended up dark. This is the important thing when you're gluing it together, because what you want to end up with is you've got to alternate. So you're going to have, start on one side, you're going to have a dark piece, and then you're going to flip the other piece to have a light. So it's going to be dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light. So then you get your pieces there. And so now we're going to go to the gluing part. And this you want to make sure that you're lined up on both sides to make sure that your board's even. And then we can put a finish around the edges, and we'll be ready to go. But we'll have to, once we glue this and this dries, we're going to have to let it sit. And then we're going to have to sand it again. And again, we're going to sand it with different sanders to make sure that we have all of our pieces that are level. So we're going to go ahead and glue these. So we tip them up on their sides, take our glue, and we're going to run our glue down each piece. And again, we're going to spread it out and make sure we got it nice. The glue's nice and spread out over the entire side. We can do this all the way around. And then we're going to go ahead and spread this around on each piece. So we'll get that all spread. We want to make sure we're covering the whole area so it fits tight. And we're going to go through And we're going to do all the pieces before we line them up. So each piece now has its glue all the way around, and this is the important part. Remember, light, dark, so you want to make sure you check that as you're going before you clamp it down. So we're going to take our pieces and we're going to start stacking them. And then we're going to line them up as we go to make sure that we have them, each piece lined up. So we have our pieces, take our clamps, pull the clamps in, and we're going to push down on it, and we're going to start the clamping process. But we don't want to go too tight yet because we want to get them all lined up. So I've got a mallet that I'm going to tap them with. And we're going to get these all nice and lined up. And it's very important to have them all lined up before you clamp it tight. So we have those. Now we're going to tighten it up a little bit. We're going to wipe off our pieces. And you see the glue starting to ooze through. And that's what we want as we're tightening. But again, for this, to keep it down, we're going to take a brick, put a board on it, and then we're going to put the brick on it in the middle before I tighten these clamps up real tight. So we're going to press down real hard, get everything clamped. Take our brick off. One more wipe down. And then we're going to take another clamp and we're going to put it on top in the middle. To tighten this all down. And don't worry, you're going to have some high spots and low spots. That's when we're going to sand them down. If you had a planer, you could run this through a planer afterwards, and it'll take less sanding. But you can do this with a belt sander, a disc sander, and then a finish sander when you're done. Okay, while our board is drying, I'm going to take this dowel, and this dowel, the one I decided to make my checker pieces, is 1 1/4 inches round. So this is going to be our checker pieces. Each player needs 12 pieces, so we're going to need 24 pieces to actually make our checkerboard. So what I've done is I've set up a jig here. I'm going to make each piece 1/4 inch thick, like that. And that's going to be your checker pieces. So we're going to need 24 of them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to leave 12 of them in the natural color, and then we're going to stain 12 of them into a dark walnut or a dark oak. So we're going to take this dowel, and I'm going to go ahead and I got this jig set up. We're going to go ahead and we're going to cut our 24 pieces. First thing, before we use hand tools or power tools, safety glasses. I'm going to go ahead and take my dowel, line that up, and I've got it on the jig here. I'm going to go ahead and keep going until I have my 24 pieces, and then we're going to sand and stain them. Okay, so now I've got the board finished. What I did is I used tung oil to actually put the finish on the board once I sanded it all down. And what I did is I took it and put a lot on there, and I spread it out with a brush and let that soak in for about 5 minutes, and then wiped it off with a microfiber cloth. So now we've got it set up as our checkerboard. So as you can see, we have our checkers. I put a border around the edge to tie it all together. And so we have our checkerboard, but what I did is I went ahead and bought a chess set. Okay, and I bought this on Amazon, and it's wooden pieces just like our checkers that we can actually use, so you can have chess set and a checker set with the same board. Remember, always dream, think, design, build, and learn. I will see you in the shop.